Hello, this is Poor Nilsson for Blender Cookie, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a low polygon, high detailed grungy brick wall as you see right here. Now I'm also going to show you how to add a graffiti layer on top of that to add a little bit of ambiance. And what is really cool about this tutorial is almost everything you see right here was made inside Blender. From the bricks to the mortar to the little cracks within the bricks to most of this graffiti that you see as well. So go ahead and fire up Blender and let's get started. Alright, now that you have Blender open, what we're going to do is kind of clean up our workspace so that we have more room. First of all, let's go ahead and get rid of this window right here because we're not going to use the outliner. So grab the tab, pull it down, and bada bing, it's gone. Next, we're going to toggle back and forth between using this tool panel and not, so you just simply do that by hitting T. So that's pretty simple, and we're just going to close that off. Now these two panels, we will be using these quite a bit, but when we don't want to use them, you just hit Control down arrow or Control up arrow to toggle between those. So now that our viewport is, or our workspace is cleaned up, let's go ahead and turn this cube into a brick. Hit 1 to go to front view, 5 to go to orthographic view, then Tab to go into edit mode. Hit S for scale, and then Z to scale, and then while holding Control, make it the size of the brick you want. Now if you look, this is far too fat, it looks like a paver, so hit S again for scale, Y to constrain on the Y-axis, and then just kind of bring that together just like that. And there's my brick. Now I want to see what this looks like when it's subdivided, so go up to Modifiers, Add Modifier, Subdivision Surface, change the view to 2, hit T to pull up the tool panel and turn on Smooth Shading, T to close that. And you can look that if we subdivided this brick, it would look like a pill. So we don't want that, and we're going to add some edge loops. So Control R will add an edge loop, so click and slide, and you can see how that kind of flattens down the side like that. Control R, click and slide, Control R, click and slide, Control R, click and slide. Now if you go out of edit mode, you can see that this brick is looking a lot better, but it looks kind of weird how it's like beveled or tapered like that. So most people would suggest that you go Control R and add 2 more edge loops right there to flatten it out, and that indeed does look like a pretty good looking brick. The only problem is if I'm looking at it straight on, it's too flat. Understand, we're going to be baking from a high polygon to a low polygon mesh, so we want as much depth as possible. So remove those 2 and leave it just like this, because already you can see how that added depth. Now, I don't want to apply this, so I'm going to go ahead and close that off and hit Add Modifier, Array. Now, an array offsets, or it duplicates geometry given an offset, so it's going in the X direction. I want 6 bricks, so I change the count to 6, and I want the offset to be 1.05 because I do want a little gap between these bricks. So there I go. Go ahead and hit Apply. Hit Shift D to duplicate this, and while holding Control, bring this up like this. And now you can see where I'm going with this, I hope. But right here, I need to know how far to move it. So Shift D, duplicate this again. R to rotate, Z to constrain on the Z axis, and then 90 degrees. This is the butt of the brick, and it will go roughly right here. And what you know, I actually did it perfectly, so I don't have to move this one way or another. So I leave it like that. Delete this brick. And now I'm ready to join these two. So Shift, while holding Shift, right click both of these. In the tool panel, hit Join, T to close that up. And there we go, we got our first 2 layers. Go ahead, hit Add Modifier again, Array. And instead of going the X direction, as you can see gives us horrible results, we're going to go in the Z direction. So change the X to 0 and the Z to 1.06, just like that. And you can see that that actually gives you the perfect little distance there. Change the count up to 4, and we are done with our section of the brick wall, so hit Apply. Now we're going to go ahead and unwrap this. Now it would take forever to actually mark these seams, and so what we're going to do is hit Tab, A twice to select everything, U to pull up the UV mapping, and then we're going to hit Smart UV Project. In the island or margin, I'm going to change that to 0.03, and then hit OK. Create a new window here, change it to UV Image Editor, and you can see our UV is very nicely unwrapped. Now there's a little overhang here, so you can just change that by hitting A and scaling it just slightly. But there you go. That's looking pretty good. Now we're going to hit New Image. Let's call this something creative, right? bricks bump map. Width 2048 by 2048, and the color a nice average gray because it is a bump map. Hit OK, and there you go. Now, I've seen a lot of different workarounds. We want to, sorry, I got ahead of myself. We want to paint on our bump map, and this is what I've seen some people do. They go up here and they create a material, which is correct, so they call it bricks material, just like that. And then they go to the texture, and they go, okay, let's call this bricks bump, like that. They go to type image, which is correct, but this is where people fail. They click right here and click brick bumps map. The problem with this is it kind of ruins the hierarchy of what it's pointing to. So if you start to append or place files from one blend to another, you start to get some weird texture imports, and it's just not good. So my rule of thumb is save this image out where you want to save it. So I have texture saved. Okay, and then open up that texture. This will preserve the hierarchy. So if you're trying to append this blend file to a different blend file, it will actually bring the textures with it according to where those textures are. So that's pretty cool. Now we are ready to start to texture paint. So let's enable GLSL shading. So go ahead and open up this tab, go down to display, and then where it says shading, click GLSL. Then click textured solid, yes. Oh, and I forgot one thing, sorry, got ahead of myself again. Where it says bricks bump, the texture, we need to change mapping to UV. No, I do not want color. Normal, I want to actually change to -1. The reason being, Blender is opposite of what most 3D softwares are. In Blender, white is down and black is up, which is completely opposite of the standard. So I always change it to -1. And last but not least, you must change bump method to best quality. If you don't do that, then you're going to get a lot of strange glitches here and there, so just do it. Now if you turn on textured shading, you can see that it is shaded according to this little lamp here. And I want a pretty even shading, so I'm going to change this to a hemisphere, just like this. And I'm going to kind of crank it down at this angle like that, so I get some cool shading going on. Alright, I'm ready to start my bump painting. So with this brick wall selected, go to Texture Paint, and then hit T to bring up my toolbar. Let's go ahead and close this toolbar by hitting N. And then if I start to draw, you can see how it draws on the bump map, and it kind of looks like I'm sculpting, which is really cool. Now I want to add some noise to this, so what I do is in my textures panel, create a new texture, and let's call this noise. Clouds is what I want, and then in this toolbar I'm going to go ahead and click on noise, and then make sure that this is pure white, otherwise it doesn't work, and then just start painting, and you can see how it paints the noise. Now you can tell that this is kind of going slow, so how you can speed that up and not lose quality is where it says stroke, you can turn the spacing to 25% or so, and you really won't see that much of a difference if you're just doing broad strokes, or you can turn it off completely. Because look at how much faster that goes, and you only really need spacing if you are doing a lot of detailed work. Now I want to show you how to bump paint, texture paint, I don't know what to call it, I guess. But before we get too much into this, I'm going to create my whole brick wall. This is only a section of it, and so I want to create my whole brick wall. So go back to object mode, select this, hit Control down arrow because I don't need anything else, and T. Hit Shift D to duplicate, X to constrain on the X-axis, and then Control to snap. If you zoom in, G Control, it'll snap just like that, and that's what I want. Shift D again for duplicate, and then G to move and Control to snap, and there we go. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to hit Shift duplicate, R, 90 degrees, but I'm going to do it in the Z axis like that, so I'm going to hit C. Now I'm going to go ahead and slide this over. It looks like it wants to fit right there, and it does. So let's make sure that it snaps correctly, and that looks actually pretty correct to me. So hit 3 to go to side view, G to move it, and then Control to snap. There you go. You have that side snapped. Now select the wall one last time, Shift D to duplicate, Z to constrain along the Z axis, and then rotate 180 degrees, nope, sorry, 270 degrees, there we go. G to move, Control to snap, bring it in tight like that, and let's make sure, yep, that's what I want. Hit Control 3 to go to the opposite side's view, G to move, and then Control to snap, and there we go. We've got our brick wall created that we want. Now we're going to start to take away some bricks to make it look dilapidated. So go ahead and click on this brick section, hit Tab, go into edit mode, and then while hovering over a vertice, hit L, and it will select that brick. So I'm just hitting L over and over again, just like that, and then hit delete. That looks too perfect, that looks like a V, so I'm actually going to just delete those, and that's looking pretty cool. And let's delete this for good measure. Now I'm going to select this, and I'm not going to delete as many, but just enough to give kind of a good looking dilapidation. I think I just made up a word, dilapidation. Sounds okay. Alright, there we go. So you can see, maybe I want just a few more bricks deleted here. Just like that, and that's looking pretty good. Click on the side panel, and now I'm going to just hit C, which brings up a selection tool, and just, select a lot of vertices, and then hit Control L to select the corresponding geometry, delete faces, and that's kind of a cool looking side of the wall where it's broken down. Select this, do the same thing, C for the selection tool, Control L, delete, and that looks pretty good just like that as well. Now our brick wall is ready to be bump painted. What you can do is you can go ahead, select that, go into texture paint, and then just paint. As you paint this, you can see how it actually paints everywhere. So you can do that. But if you look here, notice how that if I paint up here, it's not going to be painting right here because this geometry is hidden. So what you would have to do is go into object mode, select this, go into texture paint again, and then actually paint right here. So that's kind of gets annoying to select, unselect, select, unselect. So what you can do is if you want to save on time, is shift, while holding shift, right click all of the geometry, hit tab to pull up this menu, then join them. Now what you can do is texture paint, and you don't have to keep on selecting the different geometry. You can see how it just automatically goes like this. The downside to this is, yes, it does impact the speed, and it also impacts, well, that's actually pretty much it. It impacts the speed. So if you have time to unselect and select, unselect and select, feel free to do that. Otherwise, go ahead and just join everything and then just paint it like this. Now there's one last thing I forgot to do, but it's not a big deal, so go back into object mode, select this, and let's just select 3 bricks on the bottom row here. Shift D to duplicate those and just pull them out along the y-axis. I want some just individual bricks that we can throw around the place, and if I don't do this right now, it's going to be really hard to try and bake onto those. So what we're going to do is go ahead and keep texture painting, like so, and we're just going to lay down the basic feel. Make sure that you look around and that you get any face that is not textured, like right there. Get the underside if you want to, though it's not necessary. Make sure you get, underneath that brick right there. And that you just go around and you lay down the general noise. Now after you do that, what you can do is go ahead and hit Control up arrow to pull up this panel. Let's change the noise to, down here where it says basis, crackle. Okay. Now what you can do is change the strength down quite a bit, and we can add crackles interspersantly on our bricks. Now I like to do it at different angles, like that, because it actually changes the angle of the texture in accordance to the viewport. And I also like to do it in between the bricks right there, as opposed to, you know, just in the middle of a brick, because that doesn't look realistic. Just add a few crackles here and there, like that. And then when you get it looking the way you want, go ahead and just play with some different noises. I'm going to do noise, crank this way down, and turn the jitter way up. And then I'm just going to add some noise like that. And you can see how immediately that adds quite a bit to this. Okay. Now the last two things that I do is after I'm getting the noise the way I want it to look, I remove the texture, go to pretty solid gray, change the strength up to about 0.3, keep the jitter on, and then I just flatten my bricks. This way, there's still detail, but they're flattened spaces, like real bricks are. So I just go ahead and go and flatten those a little bit. Then the last thing I do is if I want to actually import a handmade texture, I change it from noise to image or movie, open up, and go to the texture that I've pre-created. I created something called scratches. No, I do not want to apply this. And then you must turn the color up to white if you want to use it. The only problem is, as you can see, let's go ahead and take off the jitter completely, turn up the strength. It's not using the texture. The reason being, under image sampling, you must unselect interpolation. If you do that, you can see that it actually uses the texture. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and change the strength down. And I'm going to add some scratches here and there. I'm actually going to change the blend to multiply, because that only picks up the dark parts and it doesn't pick up the light parts. I rotate it quite a bit, change the size just to get different looking scratches. And you can see how that's actually looking really quite nice. Okay. And so I basically do this, and that's how I texture my brick wall. Now, I didn't do the back for time's sake, and in fact, right now I'm going to go and clean up my mesh, but I just want to show you how to do this more or less. So in about 2 seconds, you're going to see a completely cleaned bump map. Alright, so what I did is I just touched it up quite a bit. So it's textured on the back as well as on the front and everywhere else. As you can see, it's looking pretty good. And this literally took me no more than about maybe 7 to 8 minutes tops. I just did a combination of what I showed you, and it's looking really good. Now, there's one last thing we need to do. So go ahead and go to the modifiers panel, hit add modifier, subdivision surface, and then crank the views up to about 2, then hit apply. The reason I did not apply that first is because it actually speeds up the painting substantially. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and create a color map for this. Now, color maps are it's going to be a lot easier to do than this. So go ahead, hit tab to go into edit mode, A to select everything, and then hit X to remove that, and then new. Let's call this Bricks Color Map 2048 by 2048, and then pick the base color to be kind of a dark reddish brown. So right about there is good. Hit OK. Save this out to the location that you save everything, and then go to Textures, New. Let's call this Bricks Color, Image or Movie, Open, Bricks Color Map, and then let's go ahead and change the mapping to UV, and we're ready to roll. Now go ahead and go into Texture Paint. We don't really need that, and we don't need that panel, so Control down arrows is fine. And before we actually start painting too much, you can see that this looks too shiny. So Control up arrow, let's go into our materials and remove specularity completely. Control down arrow again to maximize that viewport, and then right mouse click will pick up the color that the mouse is over. So I'm going to change it to a very light color first, crank jitter up, crank strength down. Now what I do is I basically just crank strength up a little bit, I guess. I put, okay. As you can see, it's kind of a dark and light texture going on. Maybe you can't see that too well. remove texture. I don't want that texture. I just want to use the brush. And now if I do it, you can see much better. Okay, so we're just putting down the textures just like this. And then the jitter is slightly too high for my liking, so I'm going to pull that down a bit. There we go. There's a nice light texture. Let's do it to this side. You can see that this side is lighted by the actual lamp a lot better than the other side. Okay, there we go. Depending on the angle you paint, you can get actually some weird artifacts. So if you're seeing like those lines that I was seeing, you just change the angle and it'll take care of it. Now I actually like some of those artifacts in the base layer because it adds interesting flavor that wasn't intended, but actually looks pretty good. So just go ahead, paint pretty much everywhere. I'm just doing this base layer here, and it's just fast and kind of dirty. And then when I get to a point that I'm more or less happy with, and again, make sure to get the top of the wall, I crank the color down and then do it over again, but with a darker color. Now I basically just repeat this several times until my brick wall is about the coloration that I want. It doesn't take very long. This whole process is maybe going to take me 2 minutes. So there we go. Make sure that you get, you know, everywhere on the top. Make sure that you get some of the tops so you don't get those strange lines. Let's crank the color up really bright. Too bright. Change the strength down, and then do it. Change the strength even down farther. There you go. Just add a little bit, not everywhere. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to add some things that aren't this red color, that are actually a kind of a yellow color. But we're going to make it a little bit more gray, just like that, because dust is kind of a gray-brown. So we're going to add just a few splotches of dust here and there. Not a lot. Just about like that. Put some here. And then we're actually going to go over most of that and remove it with the red color, but that just painting kind of underneath it will give you a good basis to work from. So right click, let's get a red color, and then let's paint kind of over that dust so the dust is very minimum and it doesn't stick out. There we go, and our brick wall is now more or less colored. If you want to tweak it, go ahead. I am actually liking what I'm looking at, and so I'm going to zoom out. It doesn't look like it, you know, I can't see any noticeable tile streaks that tile, and so it is what I want it to be. So control up arrow, go ahead and bring that up, and then what we're going to do is go ahead and save out this image just in case. And we're now going to create the mortar. Now the cool thing about the mortar is it's a pretty methodical process. It's a lot of the same thing, but we can change this to object mode. We can use the mortar as our low polygon mesh as well. So it's kind of killing two birds with one stone. So go ahead and hit Shift A, create a cube, and then under the cube, let's name this mortar. And then let's go to top view, move it right here, and let's make this X-rayed so we can see through this. Okay. I want to bring it pretty close to the edges like that, and pretty close to the edges there. Hit tab to go into edit mode, C to bring up my selection tool, and now notice how that only selects the front two. I need to disable limit selection right there, and then if I C select, it selects both my all four of my vertices. So hit G to move, and then X to constrain, and slide this all the way over to here. Okay. C select, G move, Z to constrain, move that up, like that. And there is, let's move it just a little bit more. There is the fundamental part of the mortar. So if I undo the X-ray, you can see that this is too fat, so I need to hit S for scale, then Y, and move that in like that, okay? Now let's look at that. And you can see how that's going to kind of work. So go ahead and turn X-ray back on, hit 1 to go to front view, and now we're going to add an edge loop. Control R, put an edge loop right here, C, select this, E to extrude, okay? Control R, A to unselect everything, C select, E extrude, and we repeat this over and over and over again, just building up our geometry. There we go. Now let's go ahead and do it here too. Extrude that up. Now we're actually going to have to add 2 edge loops right here. C to select those things, E extrude, and then 2 more edge loops just right here. Okay, extrude up, just like that. Now you know you're doing it right if you can see the brick outside of the mortar, just like that, but nothing else. So this can actually probably go this way just a little bit more. Select that, pull it up, just like that. I didn't move that over enough, so I'm just undoing that. Control R, pull that over. C to select, extrude it, Control R, extrude it. Now hit 7 to go to top view, and we're going to throw 1 more edge loop right there. We're going to select those vertices, hit 3 to go to side view, 8 to pivot it just a little bit, and then we're going to extrude it right there. Okay. Go to face selection mode, C, and then middle mouse button will deselect the faces, E to extrude again, and then we get to add some more edge loops. So hit 3 to just go to flat side view, Control R, add an edge loop right here, and that's where we wanted it, perfect. 3, and then 8 to pivot just a little bit. Face select mode, select that face, E to extrude, and there we go. Hit 3 to make sure that's not too fat, that's perfect. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and hide some of this, so B for box select, and then H to hide. Then we do the same thing on this side, so Control R, put an edge loop right about here, vertex selection, and then Control 3 will go to the opposite side, and then 8 to pivot. E to extrude, pull that out, just like that. Face select mode, C, middle mouse button, E to extrude, C, middle mouse button, E to extrude, C, middle mouse button, E to extrude, Control 3, throw an edge loop in right about there, and we're also going to need one right here, so might as well do it while we're at it. No, actually we're not. Okay, 8 to pivot a little bit, face select mode, select those 2 faces, E to extrude, C, middle mouse button, E to extrude, and then Control 3 just to look at that, and it's looking perfect. Alt H to unhide everything. And that's not good right there, so we can go ahead and fix that. Oh, that's right, because we added an edge loop right here. So what we can do is just go ahead and undo, and then Alt H to unhide that. Let's go ahead and add our edge loop, so Control 3. Control R, add my edge loop right about there's where I'm going to need it. Face select. Select those 2 faces, Control 3, 8, extrude, C, middle mouse button, extrude. And there we go. Now it's looking really good. Now we're also going to be using this for our low polygon mesh. So go ahead and select this mortar, hit Shift D for duplicate, and then 0 to move it back to where it's supposed to be. Now with it selected, hit M for move, select a different layer like that, and now go to that layer, and let's change the name of this to low poly brick wall. There is a few modifications we're going to have to do to this, but more or less it's done. So let's go ahead and unwrap this brick wall, this mortar. So go into tab into edit mode, U for UV mapping, smart project, UV island 0.03, and you're going to see that this is not optimized exactly. So for example, if I look right there, you can see how if I scale it down, there's a lot of space wasted. So how you can kind of fix this is with edge select, just hit Alt right mouse button, and then let's take off, let's limit selection. Shift right click, okay, to make sure that it's looped around, and then Control E marks, not mark sharp, Control E mark seam. Now it just marked a seam right there. I'm going to do the same thing right here. Just going to make another seam. Control E, mark seam, and now if I do U, smart UV project, 0.03, okay, you can see that it actually maximizes the space used a lot better, and we could play around with it, but since this is just a mortar and you won't see it that much, it's okay for as how it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply a bump map that I actually created just using basic noise. So let's create a material, new, mortar material, texture new, image or movie, open, and then I'm just going to open up this noise that I made. I called it mortar bump. There we go. And let's call this texture mortar bump. Okay, let's change the mapping to UV, and you can see what it looks like as a color. No, I do not want color. Yes, I want the normal to be -2.5, and then I'm looking at that. It's looking pretty good. And then change it to best quality. Okay. Now we actually want to subdivide this because I want to sculpt on this. So what I do is go up here and go to Add Modifiers, Subdivision Surface. Yes. Change the view up to 3, and you can see how that's not looking very good. So what I'm going to do is Control R. I'm just going to kind of add some geometry around the place. And what this does is it's going to help me sculpt because I'm going to have more faces to work with. And how I get more edge loops is Control R and then middle mouse button. I just scroll the wheel. Okay. And I'm going to take off X-ray. There we go. Just so that I can actually see what it looks like. And that's looking pretty good there. Now the only problem that I'm seeing is it's too shiny, so I'm going to take off the specularity. And I'm also going to create a new color map. So texture. Let's go ahead and hit new. Let's call this image or movie. And then hit new. Let's name this mortar color. 1024 by 1024 is actually okay because we don't need that much detail in the color. Turn it to a dark gray, hit OK. Change it to UV mapping and then color. With the mortar selected, you can use your outliner to make sure it's selected. Hit tab, go into edit mode. Okay. And then I'm going to open up my mortar color, just like this. That's my brick color. I wanted mortar color. There we go. Now I can go ahead and paint on this. So, control down arrow, texture paint, select the gray, and I'm going to select a lighter gray like this. I'm going to start to paint. Now it doesn't look like this is actually being applied to the viewport, so let's go ahead and check what's going on. It's because it's black. Okay, open. Okay, so again, you need to save this off. So image, save as image, mortar color, yes, that's what I want. And then let's go ahead and open that up. And now you can see that it's applied. And if I start to paint onto it, let's crank up the strength, you can see that it works. So basically what I'm going to be doing is with a low level strength, just paint different shades of gray. Light, dark, and I'm just going to alternate, just like that. And you can see already that it's looking pretty good. In fact, I'd be, pleased with that, but I'm going to just kind of mix it up a little bit. Do a more neutral gray. And I'm actually going to call that done because I have my light, my middle color, and my dark tone. So that's looking pretty good. Now the last thing I need to do is save this. Save image, yep. Okay. And then I'm going to start to sculpt some of this mortar. So control down arrow, go into sculpt mode, and then actually I don't remember if we applied the modifier yet. We haven't, so you have to apply that. And then go back into sculpt mode, which we're in, and then I'm just going to start to bring up some of this geometry in places. So it looks like it's kind of sloppy mortar. Just like that. And that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to do it higgledy-piggledy around. I wanted to use the word, but it didn't come out right, huh? And then just put some gunk here, gunk there. Looking nice. Put it on the back side as well, obviously. And since we want it to be grungy, it doesn't matter how sloppy it is. That matters, though. You don't have mortar, floating on a brick half the time. You can zoom in and it actually changes the strength based on how close you are. I do like putting, a lot of gunk right there in the middle. Or the crease, I guess. Now I'm going to change it to subtract, and I'm going to subtract some of the mortar too, so that I have a very uneven kind of gunky look, and this just makes it pop. So changing that, looking great, looking great, looking great. All right, the mortar is done. Now what I'm going to do is go back into object mode, select my bricks, hit tab, and then with my mouse over a brick, hit L, scale, so S, then 0.9. I'm going to be changing some of the brick sizes. 0.9 is going to be my smallest, but I'm going to have some bricks range from 0.9 to 0.99. So L, S, 0.95, and just do it to a few bricks just to mix up the pattern just a little bit. So L, scale 0.98, L, S, 0.92, L, S, 0.95, and you can see how I'm just, changing some of the bricks to different sizes. This adds quite a bit to the overall, look and feel of it. And then just 3 more bricks and I'm done. L, scale 0.9, L, scale 0.98, L, scale 0.93. There we go. Okay, now the last thing we need to do to the bricks, and then we're done with the high poly mesh, is go up to add modifiers, displace, go to noise. Let's look at what the noise is. It's clouds, that's what I want. Okay, change the strength to 0.2, and you can see that it starts to make the bricks look really kind of grunged up, and I love that look. so that's what I want. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And now we are done with our high polygon mesh. I'm going to go ahead and work on my low polygon, unwrap it, and get it prepared. And so that will just take, 2 seconds. All right, so what happened is I went and tweaked that low polygon mesh so that it fits very nicely around. Also, I moved it to the same layer as everything else, which is actually required. And then I added, if I select this really fast, I added 4 different maps: a normal map, a color map, a graffiti map, and a shading map. They're all 1024 by 1024 in black because we're going to be baking 2 of these. So 2 things you need to know about baking. First, you need to go into edit mode on the object you want to bake to, and whatever image is applied in the UV image editor is what you will bake to. It doesn't matter which one of these you have selected, it's purely what image is open in the UV image editor. Second, when you want to bake, you must select what you're baking from first, and then what you're baking to last. So we're going to be selecting the mortar, shift select the cube, which I'm actually going to change the name right now. When we merged all those, it changed it from bricks to cube.004, so I'm changing that back to bricks. So select the mortar, shift select bricks, shift select the low poly bricks, and then in the scene, there's a bake mode normals, select to active. I always just crank this up to about 29 or 33 or so. Biased, I changed to 1, and it seems to give me the best results. And then I hit bake. Now you'll see 2 things. First, you'll see it working right here, so that's a good thing. And second, you can see that on the image itself, it starts to propagate with the baked out normals. Very cool. So I go ahead and go image, save image, just like that. And then let's go ahead here, hit refresh. I'm looking, oh, and we also need to apply it. So now you can see that our low polygon wall has normals. Very, very cool. Next, we're going to go ahead, hit tab, go into edit mode, hit X, and then let's open low poly color. That's what we want to bake to. Select mortar, shift select bricks, shift select low poly bricks, scene menu, bake mode, textures, bake. Now it's going to be basically doing the exact same thing, and we just have to sit and wait. And there you go, you can see it propagating. So I'm going to do this one more time, so I'll save this out. But I'm actually going to be doing it with, so I'm going to select the low polys. I'm going to do it with the graffiti layer. And this is going to make sense later on in the tutorial, but just rest assured it's kind of necessary. So select mortar, select bricks, select low poly bricks, and then bake one more time. And here it comes. Now the only thing with this texture is it looks pretty flat. And that's okay because when we apply this with our normal map, it's going to give it depth and it's going to look just fine. The only issue though is sometimes people like to put fake shadows to give a little bit more realism to it. So let me show you what that would look like. Here's a low poly, model right there with the textures applied. If you did not have normals, look at how very, flat that looks. It does not give you any depth whatsoever. And so sometimes it's nice to bake in ambient occlusions. Now, we can't necessarily do this because Blender, as of right now, 2.58, does not allow you to bake ambient occlusions from a bump map. So what we need to do is go ahead, hit tab, go into edit mode, open up, the image you want to bake ambient occlusions to. And I figured this out. It's a very slick way of how to kind of fake ambient occlusions. So first thing we need to do is delete this lamp right here. Delete it. Hit 7, go to top view, Shift A, add a lamp hemisphere. Now hit 3 and turn it just ever so slightly like this. The reason I deleted the other one was because it was kind of pointing towards this direction, and it would make one side darker than the other. With it going straight this direction, it's making this side and this side and this side pretty much all the same color. Now this front and the back are not the same lightness, so hit 3, go to side view, Shift D one more time, R, negative 45 degrees, and now it is perfectly lit as if by ambient occlusions. Now what I'm going to do is go to my mortar and temporarily take off the texture, go to my bricks and temporarily take off the color. Sorry, not the texture, the color of the mortar. And then I'm going to select mortar, select bricks, select low poly brick wall, and then I'm going to go ahead to go to my scene, go to full render, and hit bake. Now the interesting thing about this is not only does it work with bump maps, but it works faster than your generic ambient occlusion, and it gives you kind of the same results. So there I go. There's my brick walls, ambient occlusion more or less. I'm going to go ahead and save that image. And then in my textures, I'm going to apply that. Then down here where it says blend, I'm going to go to multiply. Now what that does is it takes all my darks and makes, I need to make sure that I had that selected. Yep, I did. It takes all my shadows and kind of multiplies it onto my color map, just like that. Now that is far too dark, and so what you can do is just take the color and kind of change the opacity so that it still has some extra depth. Now what's really nice is if you're designing for something that doesn't support normal maps, if you do this method, you can see that if you crank up the color, it still looks as if there's shading to this, which is very, very cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn on the normal map and crank this back down to about 0.5 is where we want to go. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and create a graffiti layer. So we're going to just kind of create a base mesh right here, not a base mesh, a base paint right here, right here, right here, kind of as a background drop. So I'm going to enable low poly graffiti, and this is what we're going to paint on. So I'm going to go to texture paint. I no longer need this window, so I'm going to close that. Oh, actually, I lied. I do need that window. So UV image editor, tab, and whatever this is, that's what we're going to be texture painting on. So I need to change that to low poly graffiti. Okay. Now I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to go to texture paint, pick a nice white color, turn the strength up completely, and just put some white here. Oh, I'm going to take off the jitter completely. Put some white here, put some white here, put a lot of white right here, okay? And then maybe just a little right here. Now what I'm going to do is just alternate between size of brush and colors and just start to put some graffiti. So right here I might, write my name via graffiti. Oh, one last thing I need to do. Stroke, turn on space. Okay, there we go. So just write my name using graffiti just like this. Something like that. Put, hi mom over here. Change the color. Make sure that you get a lot of different colors. Reds. Some blues. Just pretty much everything. And you're just building up graffiti around this. Now, the last thing that I'll show you before I just kind of skip to the chase is when doing graffiti, if you're doing it by hand, it is good to often, let's go ahead and put just a big fat X right here. It's good to kind of put drip marks like this, because you see that on some graffiti where they sprayed so fast that it just drips. So not everything has this, but I do put these drip marks every once in a while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly just flesh this out. I'm just going to put a lot of graffiti down, and then I'm going to show you how to actually import an image to place on this. Alright, so as you can plainly see, I went ahead and put some extra graffiti everywhere. Here on the back, there's not as much, and the reason I do this is because normally it's only the part of the building that people can actually see that gets graffitied, and the part that lots of people won't see, doesn't really get graffitied as much. So I just put a little bit here. Now what we're going to do is show you how to take an image and actually put it onto this map. So first thing first, you need to create a new texture, or new texture. Go ahead and call this, well, call it anything you want. Do image or movie, open, and then find the file that you want to just project onto this. So mine is graffiti 2 is what it's called. I'm going to go ahead and turn on pre-multiply. Now, as you can see, this is a 600 by 300 image, so I'm going to change my camera to be 600 by 300 pixels. The reason I do this is now because if I go into, Control-Alt-0, you can see that this camera right here will project the image wherever this camera is. So the image would actually overreach its bounds. So I'm going to change it to orthographic view. And that's a little too zoomed in, so I'm going to change the scale just a bit, just like that. And I want to kind of plaster it right here over all this gross stuff right here. Now with that done, I select the wall, go to Texture Paint, and then go down to Project Paint, and change it to Apply Camera Image, pick Graffiti 2, and boom, it slaps it on there. Now you can go ahead and go to Smear, the smear brush, and you can kind of blend it in a little bit so it doesn't look so rough or so sharp compared to, our hand-drawn graffiti. So I'm just going to do this just a little bit, just along the edges, and you can see how that is looking pretty good too. So if I zoom out, there is kind of our final graffiti layer, and it's looking pretty nice. Now there's only one thing left to do, and that is select this wall, hit Shift D to duplicate, bring it out R 180, so rotate 180 degrees, and then just bring it just like this. Now let's go ahead and select these bricks. So L, rotate it, L, rotate it a little bit, L, rotate and move it a little bit. Okay, now L, 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 Shift D, duplicate those, bring them out, L, rotate and move in, L, rotate, move somewhere, L, rotate, just like this. So I'm just making basically debris. Shift D to duplicate, put some here, Shift D, duplicate, rotate them like this, looking pretty good. L, 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 Shift D, L, 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 Shift D, just like that. L, rotate it, move right there. L, rotate it, let's move one way out here. L, 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 Shift D, and then let's select this. We don't need these back here, so L, 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 delete those. And you can see that this is looking pretty good, just like that. Now I want to stack a few of these bricks on top of each other, so select this again, go into edit mode, L, L, Shift D, and just bring these out like this. Now hit 1 to go to front view, and just move these so that they're going to be on top like that. Move them out here. L, just bring this over just like that. There you go. L, bring this over, let's rotate it and just stack it right there. And you can see that immediately that adds so much to the scene. So now all that there is left to do is go ahead and save out all of your images. If you do not do this, saving your blend file does not, take care of everything. You have to save your images. And also, you can go ahead and combine these two, join these two, just like that. And there is your brick wall. Just set up a scene, render it out, and there you go. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It was my pleasure making it, and thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.